Hey there, well you probably clicked on this video because you're thinking about making a move to Alberta and you're wanting to know everything that you can before making your final decision on your move. Well, in this video we're going to be talking about 5 things that may be reasons that you don't want to move here to Alberta. But after this video, if you still want to make the move here to Alberta, I am a licensed realtor here in the province and I'd be more than happy to help you find your next home here in our province. If it's in my local market of Airdrie, Alberta, or the surrounding area, great, then I can definitely help you directly. But if you're looking somewhere else, please still reach out and I can get you connected to a great local agent in the city or town that you're looking in. So just reach out to me by call, text, or email, and we can start making that plan. All right, now on to our 5 reasons that you might not want to move here to Alberta. And make sure to stick around to the end because the last one might surprise you a bit. All right, and starting us off with number 1, depending on where you're moving from and where you end up in Alberta, there could be less open water and lakes than you're used to. When we're comparing Alberta to other provinces, we definitely don't have as much water as places like BC, Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, and even Saskatchewan. Now I know that in a lot of places being 5 to 10 minutes away from your lake is something that a lot of people have become accustomed to, but there's a good chance that here you're going to be a bit further from your closest lake here in Alberta. Now don't get me wrong, we do have some of the most beautiful lakes on the planet here in the Rocky Mountains in Alberta. Places like Lake Louise, Moraine Lake, Rawson Lake, and Pito Lake are often making the list of the most beautiful lakes in the world, but there just isn't as many of them here as you're going to find in other places. So if being very close to the water is something that's important to you, then that'll be something to consider before you make the move here to Alberta. Now there are plenty of options here in the province that will put you on or close to a lake, but you'll just want to be mindful of that when you're deciding of where you want to live here in the province. And moving on to our number 2 reason that you may not want to move here to Alberta, and we're going to go cliche with this one, and that is our weather. Now, of course, you already know we get cold here in Alberta, and if you're coming from anywhere in Canada, you already are well aware of cold temperatures, and honestly, with our lack of humidity, the cold doesn't quite hit as hard here as it might in the more humid climates, but you can expect 1 to 2 cold snaps each winter that'll put us in the negative 30 to 40 degree range for about a week or 2 at a time. But there is a few other weather things here in Alberta to consider. One is the wind. So the further south you go here in Alberta, the more wind you're gonna get. There's a reason that Lethbridge gets named Canada's Windy City. Next to St. John's on the east coast, Lethbridge gets the 2nd most wind of anywhere in Canada, and Calgary is the windiest big city in Canada. So if you're in the southern part of Alberta, you're definitely going to experience wind on a regular basis, and that's going to transition us perfectly into our next weather event to discuss, and that's going to be the Chinooks. Now the Chinooks are a warm, gusty wind that blows down from the Rocky Mountains from the west, and these are most noticeable in the winter as it brings relief from those cold weather and helps melt that snow every so often in the winter. But the negative side of these Chinooks is that many people here get pressure headaches from them. So if you get headaches frequently or easily, then that could be something that you definitely experience here in Alberta, though there's no way of knowing if you're going to be affected by that until you actually experience it here. And the last weather here in Alberta that we got to touch on, of course, is the hail. And again, in the southern part of Alberta is where you're going to see most of this. We have been known to see some pretty intense hailstorms here, with the hail getting to the size of golf balls or even bigger. Now the thing with these hailstorms is that they usually come through in really narrow bands and they hit hard and fast, but there's no way of knowing where it's going to get hit the hardest on any given year. So here in Airdrie was hit bad in 2014, Northeast Calgary had a bad one a few years ago, and last year the worst one was up closer to Red Deer. Now the biggest thing to make sure is that you have your home and auto insurance that covers hail damage, which it definitely should around here. But if it makes you feel any better, since it comes in very narrow bands, I've lived in southern Alberta my whole life and I've never actually personally seen any hail bigger than about pea-sized. So it's pretty random where you're going to get that hard hail each year. But long story short, we have some interesting weather here that you might have to deal with, but on the bright side, we're also the sunniest place in Canada with about 330 days of sun per year. Now on to the number 3 reason that you might not want to move to Alberta, and that is our rising house prices. Now, it's no secret that the reason that a lot of people moved here to Alberta was the affordable cost of living, and a big portion of that was due to housing. Nowadays, it's not quite as drastic of a price difference depending on where you're coming from in the country. Now, if you're coming from places like Ontario or BC, you're still probably going to look at our housing prices and think, wow, that's great value in Alberta. But if you're coming from other places such as the East Coast or Saskatchewan, things could be starting to look a little pricey around here. Since our last low point in our market in 2019, Calgary, for example, is up about 37% in their overall benchmark price. So we've seen some pretty dramatic price increases in the past few years, but the reality is that it looks like we're going to continue seeing prices increase here for a little while, just due to the amount of people moving to our province right now. So yes, our prices have gone up quite a lot, but there's a good chance that a home bought here in 2024 is likely going to be worth more in 2025, and so on from there. And now moving on to number 4, and this one has become a bit more noticeable with the fires in the recent years, and that's the smoke that we tend to get in the spring and summer months. Now, of course, this isn't an Alberta only problem, and I'd much rather deal with the smoke than having the actual forest fires around our towns here, but this is one that I've been asked about, and I'll probably continue to be asked about this if we keep seeing a lot of forest fires to the west of us. Now, we've had plenty of days in the last few years where there has been an air quality advisory due to smoke, and I'm sure we're going to see more again this year. Bad smoke typically doesn't last more than a day or two before the wind blows it elsewhere or blows it through our province. But if the fires are still burning, which they likely are, it's likely to come back again. So ultimately, it just becomes something that you end up dealing with if the fires are bad that year. And again, I'd much rather live where the smoke is than where the actual fire is, because most of our bigger urban areas in Alberta, there isn't really any risk of being directly affected by those forest fires. And now moving on to our 5th and last reason that you might not want to live in Alberta, and this one might come as a bit of a surprise, but it's our taxes. Now, of course, here in Alberta, we don't have the HST here, so you only pay a 5% sales tax, and you also don't pay a huge land transfer tax like most provinces, but for a portion of the population, you might be paying more provincial income taxes. So this is going to negatively affect anyone who's earning around $50,000 or less per year here in Alberta. You see, the lowest provincial tax rate here is 10%, and that applies to all income up to $142,000. So if we compare that to other provinces, which start at lower percentages at lower incomes, the tipping point seems to be right around that $50,000 mark. For example, if you make about $41,000 here in Alberta, you're going to pay that 10% provincial tax. None of it, you're only going to pay 4%. In BC, it'll be 5.06%, and in Ontario, it'll be 5.05%. Now, on the flip side of that, as I mentioned, around $50,000 is the tipping point. So once you've exceeded that, then you'll start to pay less taxes here than in other provinces. Ultimately, our tax rates here do benefit the higher earners as compared to other provinces. Love it or hate it, that's just the way they're set up right now here in Alberta. All right, well, there you have it. 5 reasons that you might not want to move to Alberta. If you have any questions, or if you want to add your own points of why you like or don't like Alberta, put those in the comments below. I'm more than happy to hear from anyone who's watching this video right now and open up a conversation in those comments. Again, my name is Brad Walker, local realtor here in Airdrie, Alberta. I hope you learned something today, and we'll see you in the next video.